Chapter 11, Unavoidable. I am starving. But before Alton had taken 2 steps toward the kitchen, he caught himself, because that was a huge exaggeration, and he hated exaggerations. He had never been starving, or anywhere even close to starving, not one day of his whole life. There was a large glass bowl of cut-up oranges and apples and bananas in the fridge, and he could tell his mom had prepared the fruit within the past hour, because the bananas hadn't started turning brown yet. He had both hands around the bowl when Beth said, "Can you reach me down a blueberry yogurt?" "Sure," he said. He let go of the fruit, got the yogurt, and without being asked, he pulled the foil off the container and handed it to Beth with a smile. "Thank you. You are so welcome." Alton put the fruit on the table, grabbed up a soup spoon from the drawer, sat down, peeled the plastic wrap off the bowl, and dug in. It was so good. He was on his 5th mouthful when his mom walked in and said, "Guess what? She stopped and stared. "Alton, did you really think that entire bowl of fruit was just for you? Honestly, you'd think we lived in a cave somewhere. Get a cereal bowl, serve yourself a reasonable portion, and put the rest back in the refrigerator now." Alton said, "Oh, right, sorry. It's just that I was really hungry." Once he was sitting down again, his mom said, "I was just starting to tell you that I got a new phone today." Alton's mouth dropped open, and he forgot all about the fruit, some of which was there in plain view, half chewed. "I got a new phone? A new phone? That's amazing. Hold it," his mom interrupted. "You didn't hear me, Alton. I said I got a new phone. But it does mean that I now have an old phone, and your dad and I have decided that you can use it. And the woman at the phone store got it set up, so all you need to do is plug in the data card from the phone you have now. And immediately after you do that, you will have to call Heather and Val and Christopher and tell each of them to stop sending texts to my number, all right?" And she reached out and handed Alton the phone, her old one. He took it and held it with both hands as if she might suddenly change her mind and try to wrestle it away from him. "This is so great, Mom. Really, this is perfect. Thanks." And he jumped out of his chair and gave her a hug, still holding the phone tightly. Beth's eyes got huge. "So, now I can have Alton's old phone, right?" Her mom shook her head. "No, dear, I'm sorry. Not until you're in 4th grade. That's our rule." "It's a stupid rule." Alton had to smile, even though he felt a little sorry for Beth, because he knew that the argument she had just started was going to last for at least 2 more years. Alton gobbled the rest of his fruit, then left the kitchen, trotting up the stairs and into his room. He already knew his mom's phone inside and out. He was sure he understood it a lot better than she did. It was almost 2 years old, but it had a big, bright touchscreen, good control buttons, and a decent GPS app, which was already installed and was almost as accurate as the handheld GPS unit he'd been using for geocaching over the 2 years. And the antenna on this phone pulled in satellite signals strong and clear. It took him less than a minute to insert his SIM card and restart the phone. And there they were, all his contacts, which weren't very many, but now it was official. This phone was his. He was excited about the phone, and he had fun over the next half hour getting it set up just the way he wanted it. But tomorrow morning's meeting with Mrs. Buckley hung there in his mind like a large gray cloud. He opened up the Google Earth app on the phone and messed with the settings. Then he moved the image until it showed the view from high above the town of Harper's Grove. Then he zeroed in on the roof of his school. He knew just where the principal's office was, there at the front, near the driveway. When he had the image centered correctly, he wrote down the latitude and longitude on a yellow note card. It was kind of a dumb thing to do, but seeing that familiar-looking set of numbers made him feel better. Now he knew exactly where he would be sitting right before homeroom tomorrow. But he had no idea what he'd say. How do you tell somebody like Mrs. Buckley that she says too much. It was an impossible assignment. But then he had a good thought. How would Elena or her pals or anybody else ever know what he was saying to the principal? Yes, someone could tell if he talked with Mrs. Buckley just by looking into the office, but they'd never know what he'd actually said to her, not unless they were right there in the room. Then a horrible thought hit, and it almost took his breath away. The only other kid who was going to be there inside the principal's office was Quint, who had specifically asked if he could come along. So, was Quint in on this plot after all? Was he just a really fantastic liar? Was he the mastermind putting together this huge practical joke and sharing it with all his friends? Look at me, Alton thought. I'm going completely crazy about this. Quint's a good guy. I'm sure he is. But his doubts about Quint wouldn't go away, not completely. And even having a smartphone of his very own didn't make him feel better. Unless he wanted to risk having his maps get loose and maybe hurt a lot of people's feelings, he had to accept the idea that somehow the map napper would be able to check up on him, would somehow know whether he had talked with Mrs. Buckley about her ing. Alton put down his phone and picked up the yellow note card from his desk. He stared at the GPS coordinates he had copied down. The principal's office was tomorrow morning's special destination, and there was no way to avoid it.